Hello, YouTube, and happy Easter. As promised, I said that I was going to go ahead and give my thoughts on Ghost in the Shell, starring Scarlett Johansson. Before we get into it too deep, I would like to admit that I have not watched the 1995 anime, and I do plan on doing that soon, as I just bought the Blu-ray. With that being said, I have read the manga, the first volume of the manga at the very least, and I went ahead and did a little research on, the storyline that kind of inspired the movie. With that being said, this review will contain some spoilers, and I will touch on the so-called whitewashing controversy a little bit, um, as it does pertain to the storyline at least. With that being said, just so you know my kind of criteria for rating movies, I would argue that the worst two movies I've ever watched would be Mamma Mia and The Last Airbender. I consider both those movies unwatchable and not movies that anybody should see for any reason or any circumstance. Um, And with that being said, I definitely look at the hero's journey when it comes to the overall arcing story arc and when it comes to judging that. So with that being said, the thing about the Ghost in the Shell movie that just came out is that the storyline in some ways is a bit of an origin story. Instead of looking at big picture issues with cybernetics and stuff like the singularity emerging with machines, it very much becomes a story about identity. Yes, it does delve into things with, humanity and its issue with diving into machines, but it maybe not in the deep way that a lot of people would like it to. And very much so for those reasons. With that being said, the Major's story arc is one that's is pretty interesting. I've looked at some other reviewers, and I kind of get it. There are times that the Major sort of feels a little wooden. I guess you could say maybe wooden isn't the right word, considering we're talking about cyborgs, but um, I think Scarlett Johansson did the best job she could, uh, given that regard. We're talking about someone who's, she's kind of been branded as the female lead. Movies like Lucy or The Avengers. Between those two movies, I think that she's sort of proven herself for the role. Um, with that being said, the controversy that people are talking about actually does kind of play into the storyline. Um, already an argument can be made that cyborgs can sort of take on their own forms, and in a way, you know, the Honka Corporation, as they are, heavily featured in the movie, just decided to put her in a Caucasian body. It is found out later in the movie that she was a Japanese woman who was kidnapped. Her brain was put into a cybernetic body, and her memories were erased, essentially. And when the Major begins to discover that, that's kind of when the whole overarching plot kind of builds on that. Um, with that being said, I love the inclusion of Section 9. I like the casting for that. I thought the Chief was great. I thought Kasanagi was great. And I thought Batu was great. Batu definitely plays the mentor role in some ways, and it works really well. Um, with all that being said, it's pretty interesting that they chose a storyline that was based on the standalone complex's second season, as opposed to the original movie or its sequel. So it focuses on Kuz, who is a cybernetic terrorist, and it doesn't follow it exactly to the point, at least from what I looked up. In this version, yes, the Kuz and the Major, they have this storyline that, where they both knew each other before they became cyborgs, and that was something that they borrowed from that. But what happened to them is kind of different. It was shown in the episode that they survived a plane crash. In this one, it was like they were part of an anti-technology group. And then, it was heavily implied that they may or may not have been romantically involved in their previous life, which I think in itself is, it's not really relevant to the plot too much, but it makes for things to be pretty interesting. With that being said, the Major was given this false memory. Instead of being kidnapped by Haka, she is, she was led to believe that she was a refugee that survived a terrorist attack on her boat and that her parents were killed. That wasn't the actual case of what happened, but it was interesting that they kind of referenced things like that, and definitely in this future, things like terrorism is still a big issue. And with that being said, it is pretty interesting that most of the cast is not fully cyborg. They're mostly enhanced, which it kind of brings up the question, why is it there's such an interesting mix? I mean, yes, the movie still takes place in Japan, but when it comes to racially speaking, and this is based on the globalist way that the world's headed, a multi-ethnic casting definitely makes sense. And with that being said, I also liked how the movie kind of takes the more East Asian cinema style. Yes, it was definitely a Western production with a Western director, but everything that you look at it, there are moments you look at it and like, oh yeah, that definitely looks like something that I would have seen in, a Japanese cinema or something like that. There's the lighting and some of the action sequences have that. And with that, visually speaking, I think that's where the movie really shines. I don't think the visuals were perfect, only because I thought they relied so heavily on CGI. And, let's face it, in the last couple of years, there's been kind of a rebellion against CGI in movies. But it's definitely something that that works. Now, from my understanding, there are some 3D showings of the movie, and if you can go see a 3D showing, I would highly recommend it, because there are moments that are going to look really good in 3D. So, there's definitely that. And also, visually speaking, I would say it looks like a live action anime, which, if that's what they're trying to accomplish, they succeeded. And I think everyone who's seen the movie can agree that visually this is a great movie. When you're working in a visual media like film, you're gonna want there to be CG. I mean, not CG, but you're gonna want it to be visually stunning, to the point that it's something that you want to see. It's just the way that it works as a medium. With that being said, instead of the traditional 5-star rating, and I'm probably going to do this for all future movie reviews, I simply give it an approval. Go see the movie. Currently, it's bombing in the U.S., but I think there's an opportunity for maybe in the long run for people to find some interest in it. If you're letting the whitewashing thing stop you from seeing the movie, then honestly, you're kind of an idiot because you're missing out on something that's entertainable and enjoyable. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I hope you're having a happy Easter.